Making a difference in healthcare requires collaboration between researchers, startup founders, and policymakers. This is what Delta is about, hosting conversations with leaders on the path to serious innovation. Hello everyone, my name is Rupen, and I'm a physician on a journey to meet people who are making a delta in healthcare. Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode. Today, I'm so lucky to have the CEO and the founder of Navigation Sciences, Alan Lucas. Alan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to being a part of your podcast here and tell you a little bit about the work that I've been doing over the last few years in the development of navigation sciences, as well as some background in my career in developing minimally invasive surgical instrumentation and implants over the last, I'm embarrassed to say how many years, so I'll let you guess.
I love that. Can you tell the listeners like a bit about what is navigation sciences? Like if someone doesn't know anything about the company and it's the first time listening or hearing about it, like what is it?
I very much appreciate that question. Uh, One of the things when I first learned about the technology from the Brigham and Women's Hospital was the ability to be able to navigate in soft tissue. As the tissue moves around during surgical procedures, it deforms and takes different shapes. And particularly in surgical oncology, that can make finding and locating where the margin is or where the safe margin would be to reduce local recurrence becomes very, very important and critical. And so when I first saw the initial patents to this technology and I was introduced to it by the innovation office, I thought, gee, that's really novel and very clever. And that's what really sort of got me started with down the path of putting this company together.
Can you tell me a bit more about the technology? And I want to chime in to give my experience because this is something I see a lot. Like lots of patients who go, not lots of patients, good amount of patients when we were not able to achieve clear margins. But like, can you explain to the listener who doesn't have any idea about clear margins and like surgical margins? What does that mean?
Oh, yes. So uh, typically, you have the tumor itself, the cancer or the lesion, and in order to get a clear margin, there's a certain distance from that tumor edge. And in most tumors, that's very well published, how far you need to be away from that tumor to make sure that there are no additional cells that are remain in after the actual surgical removal. Those cells then can multiply and create a local recurrence. So that's why it's so very critical to understand what that distance is. In lung cancer, which is our first market application, for instance, there are a lot of tumors that are now being diagnosed through screening that are very small, 2 centimeters or less in size. And if you do a full lobectomy or a segmentectomy, you're taking a lot of tissue that you may not necessarily need to do that. And these are
Mhm.
patients that particularly already have lung volume, they're compromised in the lung volume, most likely from a long-term smoking. And so by being able to target those lesions with navigation, the location, to be able to mark that area, create a three-dimensional model of what that tumor or that lesion looks like. Now you can create an envelope around that tumor of that safe area around the actual lesion itself. And then guide the surgeon in the cutting instruments to be able to cut around that tumor, but also leaving tissue behind that doesn't have any tumor within it, but also can maintain as much lung volume as possible. Hopefully, that I was trying to give it as a lay person perspective on that. But
Yeah.
that's
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but that's what got me so excited about the company. There was another aspect of it that also got me very enthused about lung cancer in particular. If we look at other cancers, like prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. Many of those are discovered through screening. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in breast cancer and in prostate cancer, it's up in 70% of new cases are discovered from screening, and usually at an early stage where these cancers are very curable. In lung cancer, in the past, very often these patients were discovered at a stage 4, where 5-year survivals are maybe 15, 20%. If you can discover these cancers at a stage 1, the long-term survival is anywhere from 85 to 95% at the 5-year point. So, but in discovering these cancers through low-dose CT screening, you're finding these lesions that are smaller and smaller. And that's where the surgical navigation system that we've developed at Navigation Sciences really aids the surgeon in providing a precision location as to where to remove the tumor, but also to do a wedge resection or a segmentectomy where you're trying to preserve as much lung as possible and lung volume.
I completely agree with you. I think this is a so the margins of a tumor. Think about it like if you have a scar on your hand and you go a plastic surgeon and you want to remove the scar, you don't want the plastic surgeon to cut the clean skin that has nothing and cause another scar. You just want them to remove the scar tissue itself and make your hand look better. Let's put it in simple terms that way. And I think that's what the clear margins are. Like it's something I see beyond also like I think your first focus was on lung cancer, but we see it in breast cancer, we see it in melanoma, we see it in lung cancer. Every single tumor, usually most of the cancers, when we're going to treat them, we have like either surgery or chemotherapy or radiation. So surgery is usually done for early tumors if we can remove it single part or one part. And we need that area of safety, clean tissue around it where the human eye, can't detect where the normal tissue begins and the cancer tissue ends. And that's why, like, I was very excited about what you guys are developing at Navigation Sciences to help, like, the human eye to better see where to cut.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought up some of the other applications where we could use our technology. So,
Yeah.
and those include particularly in the head and neck. So
Mm-hmm.
again, soft tissue that deforms, that you can clearly delineate on either MR or CT imaging where the tumor is itself. We place an electromagnetic sensor into where the tumor is. We
Mm-hmm.
also have sensors that are built into our instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
Now the two are triangulating between each other while we've mapped out the tumor with a 3D model. We've got a sensor on the instruments, and
Mm-hmm.
now we're providing real-time feedback to the surgeon interoperatively while they're performing this actual surgery itself. So we're an aid to the surgeon, both from a visual perspective, but also an interactive perspective with the imaging, the preoperative or intraoperative imaging, depending upon what it's done. And so applications like in head and neck cancer, partial thyroid resection. Another area where we have feel that there's great promise is in liver resection, where you
Mm-hmm.
have major vascular structures in the liver itself that you can't see on the surface of the
Yeah.
liver. So if we're able to provide a map of the liver through our imaging technology, we can now guide the surgeons around major vascular structure and partial liver resections. Neuro is another area where we feel that there's a significant opportunity for us. So now, current navigation systems use fiducials that are placed on the skull, on soft tissue, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And then they create a 3D model with the preoperative images. For us, we actually place the sensor with a needle into where the lesion is. And then when you open up the dura, when the brain shifts, we're able to calculate that deformation. And that's very much a part of our IP. When I first licensed the technology from the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
we had two patent applications,
Mm-hmm.
uh, both talking about the 3D modeling and the interface between the fiducial and the instrumentation. And we worked very, very hard to expand our patent portfolio. We now have four US issued patents and one international issued patents for Germany, France, UK, and Switzerland. We have pending applications in Japan and China to really
Oh,
cover
wow.
our technology globally. So we've invested a significant amount in our intellectual property portfolio. And in some respects, some days I feel when I'm paying the bills that we're almost 50% intellectual property and 50% development costs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. I think like protecting your intellectual property is the most important thing when it comes to this space because like that's the barrier of entry. If you can't protect it, like I heard about companies. Well, this is beyond. They didn't. They developed the intellectual property and they sold intellectual property even before starting a company or selling their first product. So I think the intellectual property sometimes could be the product itself. Um, I'm
I think
interested. Sorry, go
if
ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to follow on that comment a little bit.
Yeah.
So when we think about when we're building these development stage companies, I mean, ultimately the goal is to be able to sell the company to somebody that already has the existing channel into the
Hmm.
marketplace. I mean, and that's really ultimately, and there are various inflection points you may need to get to early sales or, in the sales of 20, 30, 40 million range to then attract the acquirer. But the acquirer is not really buying your sales force. The acquirer is buying your intellectual property,
Yeah.
the market opportunity
Hmm.
of what you've done, and the technology about how you solved it. But when to get back to your comments about intellectual property, your patents have to be really very, very well prepared and done appropriately to provide you that protection. And how you implemented your devices to be able to use clinically. I mean, that's ultimately what the acquirer is buying.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I want to go back to one of the comments you mentioned is like when you pay the bills for this intellectual property patent or the IPs. So I think one of the hardest thing is raising money in healthcare. It's something I've witnessed. I think part of it is like raising money in healthcare is not like when you go and then you have this AI tool that can answer all your questions and people can see it in real time. I think the problem is like how do you educate VCs or like fund managers about the importance of the technology? I think that's the hardest part I've seen. But I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Like, can you tell us about like the financing? How were you able to navigate it, raise money, and get those IPs in place?
That's it's a really tough question for our entrepreneurs in how they address the financing aspect. So let me uh, give you sort of a roadmap that I followed. The first thing that I did, was I raised the initial monies just between myself and the my co-founders
Hmm.
to be able to secure the intellectual property from the standpoint is license it from the institution itself. I didn't look for any outside money for that. That we invested ourselves to do that. Then I wanted to create a very clear roadmap of what would it take, an engineering plan. Really, it's primarily an engineering plan, but it also had, other aspects of the overhead, the intellectual property, the legal aspects, to really understand what will it take in best case scenario to get to and through the FDA. What's the total dollar amount to get there? And you need to put some contingencies in place. But that to me was really my next step because the amount of capital that you need to get to that inflection point will also dictate where you will seek your sources of capital from. So for instance, if it's a diagnostic tool and it's going to be $25 million to get through the FDA, that's a different investor than, let's say, a surgical instrument that you can get through the FDA for $7 to $10 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you really need to understand what your development roadmap is to through FDA, which is really the key milestone. And then how much capital do you need to get to through early commercialization? So that was really the first step. I recognize because the technology that we're getting was software and hardware combination.
Hmm.
Uh, and I also wanted to look at what was the marketplace for capital investment in medical devices, particularly in
Hmm.
the area that we were working. And I didn't see that there were venture capital or institutional investors that in the area that we were working in and the amount of money that we were looking for, that to me didn't seem to be the pathway that I thought was best for us to go down. The pathway I felt more confident with the technology that we were working in was to one, keep the company virtual,
Hmm.
uh, least amount of W-2s. We have essentially two W-2s in the company itself. So salaried individuals in the company. Work with independent contractors or 1099
Hmm.
or contract engineering firms as a way to develop our product through the inflection point of FDA. So reduced overhead, reduced burn rate, get to milestones were critical. And then, uh, so then I thought, well, what investor do I want to work with? Well, I didn't want to do, at the time, I didn't think it was the best pathway to go down seed investor groups. Primarily because many of them really can't invest more than as individuals, uh, somewhere between 15 and
Yeah,
$25,000.
that's right.
The aggregated group together might be 250, 300,000. I didn't sound like that
That's
was
not
the
enough.
best pathway for our where we were going. So I was very fortunate that I was able to identify through some consulting work that I had been doing before the firm that I was working with uh, essentially brought in some clients that we had that invested in our first sort of seed round, A round, and also into our B round. So these are family funds or high net worth individuals who own MedTech uh, type companies
Gotcha.
that understood what we were doing, understood what the capital requirements were, and could write checks in the $500,000, $600,000 range. And so, in that instance, we've been very fortunate that to date we funded the company with $5.5 million. I think the average check size is roughly around $500,000, $600,000 per
Oh,
investor.
wow.
So our cap table is fairly small, but they've appreciated our very capital efficient approach to how we've done things. Now, the company, when we're probably about 9 months from FDA filing,
Hmm.
and the company will transition, post FDA to most likely a larger institutional type investor. But at that point, we've kept our burn rate down. We've kept our, another thing that's was very important to me is to always be looking at doing a waterfall analysis
Hmm.
on our cap table. So I fully understood how much capital I'm going to need, which goes back to what the plans that I laid out at the beginning. How much capital am I going to need? What's the post money valuation of the company's going to be when I get through the FDA, or at least what I think will be? And will that still be in a range that institutional investors would be interested in? Because they're going to need what their multiple needs to be at final exit. And I think we've been done very well so far. I'm very long, very complicated answer, but hopefully that tells you a little bit about the thought process that I put to putting this company together.
No, it does. It does. I do have a couple of follow-up questions on that. And I think you highlighted the important things. I think choosing your investor wisely, because like the source of the money comes with responsibility, and then the check size is something that not lots of people um, think about early during their fundraising. So I just want to go back. So you raised all this money. Do you have any tips for people who are navigating now, like fundraising? Like, how would you approach the term sheet?
Well, I don't know. I think the most important thing is that your investor be excited about what you're doing in the
Hmm.
area that you're working in. I think before you start getting into terms and understanding, they have to understand the passion of what you're doing and understand what you're working on. And because they're investing in you, they're sort of investing in the jockey here.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be some connection with the entrepreneurs and the people who are working in the company. My co-founders have been also very helpful in not necessarily bringing in the investors, but being a part of the conversation with the investors, because my co-founders have, an incredible passion to what they've invented.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a very much a part of it. I did a combination of investment vehicles. First started off with the convertible notes,
Hmm.
and then to equity,
Hmm.
to convertible notes, then to equity. So at various inflection points, to begin with, it's very hard to place a valuation on what a
Yeah.
company can be. So we started with notes. We did a conversion, which what we call the A round. So
Yeah.
we people get stuck on what seed, pre-seed, seed, A round, B round. Many people would think because of the size of the amounts of money that we raised, we're still really in a seed or A round category. But we did it multiple steps and stages. And one of the things, most of all our investors started off at the seed or the A, and then followed into the B. So I think all our investors have pretty much followed at each round. And they like to see step ups along the way. They also like to see new investors come in at each round.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so and maybe it's not typical, the term sheet for our notes were pretty standard. Convertible notes, 20% discount, interest coupon, and I don't think that there was any magic in that. When we created the actual term sheet for the stock purchases, we looked at what the current market comps were looking at for companies like ours. We looked at how much capital has been put in and what inflection point we're at.
Hmm.
And we created our own term sheet. And we're very fortunate that our investors thought that they were very reasonable and provided, based on, and some of the investors I went over the waterfall analysis of, what the value of the company anticipated would be at the next round to follow. And a lot of them were very encouraged by the step ups that they saw from their original investments.
Gotcha.
But that I think is not, I don't think that's typical for a lot of companies. A lot of companies, the investor writes the term sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the FDA when you were talking about, and where are you right now when it comes to the FDA process?
We've had a pre-sub meeting with the FDA.
Mhm.
Well, first off, I should state that one of the other things that was very important to me was to get into humans as quickly as possible. So we did a 25 patient feasibility study under an IDE with the FDA that we completed last year. So that was a very critical, important milestone, not only for me to get an understanding of what we needed to do to in the product development cycle and what improvements we could learn from that because you learn more from being in the clinic than you do on a benchtop
Yeah.
or even an animal study. And so that provided a huge amount of interest. And having completed that with bringing in new investors, because investors like to see things come in at different levels depending on where things are de-risked. So having had first in human was a big de-risking opportunity for what we were working on. And we took that data to a pre-sub with the FDA. And
Hmm.
so I think we had a positive pre-sub meeting with them. We're going to go back and do a supplemental pre-sub with the FDA probably sometime in the first quarter
Hmm.
to talk more about now that we've completed and frozen the design for our product. We're going to go back and we'll likely present them with protocols for an additional animal study with the
Hmm.
finished product. So we don't have to go back to humans again. And that would be in preparation for doing our 510(k) filing.
Awesome. That sounds very challenging, but also it's very interesting. I think you're on. So these things are familiar to me, but like, so when it comes to for people who are not familiar with the process, like whenever you want to prove that something works, first you have to say it's safe for animals, and then you're going to say it's safe for a small number of human beings who are healthy. So those are the things that we are talking about. But no, this is really cool, and I love the way you thought about it because like these medical device innovation medical device, I think it's challenging, it's tough, and you guys know what you are doing. You're navigating it in a good in a good way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm sure that there'll be more surprises along the way, but you know, it's as you say, it's never easy. But if it was easy, they wouldn't need us.
Yeah.
You're always going to come up. There's going to be some block that happens along the way. It may be technical. It may be capital. It may be staff. People that you're working with or companies that you're subcontracting to. But it's really how you navigate through that is what I think makes a success.
Gotcha. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that also you created a group, the New England Executive Network. Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Yeah, so roughly around 14 years ago, in
Hmm.
fact, December 2000 and sorry, 2000, I always lose a decade here and there. Uh, 2009, it was. Um, at that point in time, I was doing a fair amount of consulting. The most of the work that I was doing actually was out of Europe, and I noticed I'd go to various networking groups in the Boston community, and I wasn't necessarily meeting the individuals that I thought that were going to either help me in my career or advance my consulting practice. Uh, and so I got sort of disillusioned by that. And I thought, well, maybe it would be a good idea just to create my own networking group. And one of the things that was critical to me, I came from a very narrow area, which I'm continuing to work in, which is surgical instrumentation and implants, mostly minimally invasive surgical implants. And those are the only people that I knew were in that very field. But Boston's very rich with medical institutions. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
has lots of biotech, pharma, healthcare IT, a lot of areas that I had no exposure to. So I started off the group. I invited 10 individuals who I didn't know very well, but they're all C-level. They came from different market sectors. I invited them over to my house and said, what my mission was is to create a small little networking group where we could all get together on a monthly basis and help each other through our various aspects in our activities. And everyone said, "Hey, this is a great idea." And we started meeting at one of the local law firms, Foley Hoag, and they gave us a room to meet in. And we did that. We scheduled it for always for the first Monday of the month at 8 o'clock in the morning. And that, with the idea being, is you could start your week off, be out of the meeting by 9 or 10 o'clock, and get on with your week. And we did that for a couple of months. And then I just got this idea, we don't have to keep this just to 15 people. And I just started inviting everybody that I knew and met along the way. And all of a sudden, we had about 75, 80 people
Oh,
coming on the
wow.
first Monday of the month. And this was in 2010. And by and I was buying, I first started off, I was bringing in boxes of Joe from Dunkin' Donuts, and they got to be too heavy to carry in because there would be so many people there. And then there was a local commissary in the building that we were at, and they brought in an urn of coffee, and I was paying for that out of pocket. And I'd ask people to put some money in the cup next to the coffee there to help offset the cost. And I'd go there and I'd look, and there would be like $10, $15. And the next time I'd go and say, look, you can't get a go to Starbucks for less than $5. Put something
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah.
And when the people, the commissary came to pick it up, they thought that that was their tip, so they took that. And at which point in time, I partnered with a young fellow recently out of college who was interested in MedTech and healthcare technology, and he really helped me put together a much more formalized Eventbrite program with MailChimp for the mailings and things of that sort.
Cool.
And now, the organization has sponsors, and we run 9 meetings a year, first Monday of the month, and we get the last meeting we had 125 people there. It was
Oh,
on
wow.
financing. Was our December meeting. January, we'll be talking about the public equities market and healthcare. So that will be usually is a very popular
Hmm.
meeting. We get cross market verticals, which is exactly the goal that I wanted. The other thing, and we kept it going through COVID or through Zoom, but I've made the organization only live. We don't do any taping or
Recording, yeah.
recording of it because I want everyone to actually come because they come for two reasons. One is to network and to meet other folks and to for content. You
Yeah.
can't get the networking through Zoom.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
I've since gone back and developed a group of roughly around 15 of us. And I sort of come full circle. About 15 of us meet also once a month on key topics. And
Hmm.
usually one of us, we rotate between the 15 of us and we take a topic of discussion. One of our members at this, we call it the executive roundtable. And one of our members on next Wednesday, he's going to be talking about strategic investment, licensing, and M&A because he has a lot of experience in that area. So now I've got my New England Healthcare Executive Network that supports the local ecosystem here in the Boston community, and I have my small little group where we have 15 of us supporting us in our business and business activities. So I thank you for that question. That was one thing I wanted to be sure to let everybody know, particularly your listeners who are in the Boston community.
Oh, wow. So just to confirm, these meetings are in person only.
In person only.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. I
That's
think,
that's the rule. But we're welcome to have you come to Boston and join us if you'd like.
yeah, I would love to come and join you one time. That would be amazing. I would love that. All right, Alan, I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing all this wisdom with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's great. I usually am not a loss for words.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it being here today.
Thank you. Take care now.